This is Greg Canty here, and welcome to the Win Happy podcast. Stay tuned for interesting chats with interesting people about winning their lives and being happy at the same time. This show has been brought to you by Fusion Communications. Thanks for listening. On today's podcast, I chat with happiness coach Maggie O'Sullivan about the importance of finding happiness in your life. She talks about taking stock about where you are, making a plan for the future, and building the right bridges to get you there. She also talks about the importance of summer holidays and this unique opportunity for self-reflection. You have the power to change. Let's hear from Maggie. Maggie O'Sullivan, a huge welcome to the Win Happy podcast. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Greg.
Yeah, a lovely Friday at the beginning of the summer. I love this time of the year.
Me too.
It's a time of hope and good weather. We always hope that you're going to get a few months of it or something. And if it doesn't happen in May, it might happen in June. And if it doesn't happen in June, it might happen in July. But it's that hope eternal thing. I just love this time of the year, and everything is bright and longer evenings and all that kind of stuff.
My husband sometimes jokes that we get the summer out of the way in May. We get it over with. Yeah. We're in the middle of Scaraveen na Cuach here in Kerry at the moment. Are you familiar with that?
Well, I'm familiar with Kenmare, but that particular location...
No, it's not a location. It's a weather condition.
Oh, it's a weather condition.
Scaraveen na Cuach is a cold wind that blows here for about a month on and off between the middle of April and the middle of May. Around the same time that the cuckoo comes. Na Cuach is the cuckoo. Okay. And so you can have lovely weather 1 minute and then, like right now, freezing cold wind, like go through your wind, even when it's sunny.
And tell me, in Kenmare, nearly everyone is close to the water, but do you have any special advantage there? Are you very close?
I'm very close. I can see the sea from my window. I'm out on the Beara Peninsula. I'm about 15 miles from Kenmare. And so Kenmare Bay comes out along, and I'm just on the shores of Kenmare Bay.
Is that good for your state of mind?
Oh, are you kidding? It's the best. It's the best. Like, study after study shows that nature is good for us. Even looking at the colour green in an artificial context, like a piece of paper that's coloured green or a computer screen that's coloured green, lowers your blood pressure. So being surrounded by nature is automatically good for your health. Exercising outdoors is more beneficial than exercising indoors because you get this exposure to nature. All this talk about your gut biome now, the increased focus on the bacteria that are inside us. And the findings are that being in contact with the soil is as good as an antidepressant. Or, maybe not as good for people with clinical stuff going on, but for people within the normal realms of mental health, the more mainstream realms of mental health, being in contact with the soil and the ground is so good for us in ways we never even knew about. Then there's the fact that I get to drive to work every morning going, I live here. You see people, tourists, we have a lot of visitors here, and they come and they spend an absolute fortune to get here. Ireland's an expensive place to holiday. And they spend a lot to get here, and they spend a lot to be here. And we get to be here for nothing. It's not for nothing with our cost of living crisis, but it's our norm. And I try very hard not to take it for granted.
So if I'm living in an urban centre and the cost of accommodation is so high and everything else, and because of those high overheads, I'm living in a small apartment block, and I don't have a garden, and the view out my window is a road and maybe office buildings or other apartments and lots of concrete and tarmac at them. Is that bad for you?
Well, I think there's certainly scope for improvement. And if you're finding that you're less than happy, if you're finding that you're discontent or, a bit fed up, there's improving the amount of nature exposure in your life would be certainly a good place to start. We all have windowsills. There's plenty you can do with houseplants, growing microgreens, things like that. Cork has a big new houseplant shop. actually. I can't think of the name of it now. In your neck of the woods, a specialist houseplant shop. Houseplants are so trendy now, and they don't even have to be expensive. You can get bits and bobs from friends. Look up on YouTube how to propagate them from a cutting. But you can also choose where you spend your free time. You go off out into nature and soak it up as best you can. So while I think there are definitely health risks to living in urban centres, with air quality, we've been hearing so much about air pollution over the last few years. And, with the looking at the sale of turf and things because of the health damage that air pollution can do, I didn't realise quite how damaging the burning of fossil fuels could be. Growing up in Kerry, everyone burns turf. I think perhaps we're so spread out here, the risk mightn't be so much, but in an urban centre, you could see how it would be. But that means that we just have to put in those little protections for ourselves, spending time in clean air when we can.
And turf was relatively cheap and it was available locally. And
we used to cut our own, yeah. Most people in this area cut their own. Back in my dad's day, now we'll say back in the 50s, it was a big community thing. They would all go together to the bog. But even growing up here in the 80s and 90s, most people cut turf or bought it from one guy who had the bigger bog or whatever.
Yeah, because you did mention that chill wind as well.
Yeah, that's for drying turf. This would be the time of year when you'd be cutting turf and that wind would dry the turf. My dad used to always be happy to see the wind. Sun and wind is magic bog weather.
So the reason I wanted you on the podcast, and I know we connected on LinkedIn, and I know from your bio and everything that you're a certified life coach, but you use some language on your bio that attracted me, and of course we're on the Win Happy podcast. You call yourself a happiness coach.
Yeah.
And you pose a question on your profile. What does happiness mean to you right now? And that's a question, of course, that I ask all of my guests on the Win Happy podcast. So you were a perfect guest for the Win Happy podcast. And I know from our conversations and your bio and all that kind of thing, you're not doing this for too long. But in a way, you may have been doing it forever and itching towards what you're doing now.
Yes.
So what I'd like to do is to give the listener a sense of who you are, but what brought you to this moment and doing what you're doing. So I'm going to hit a colossal rewind and ask you the question, who the hell are you and where did you come from?
Okay. With a sense of how did I get here and what brought me here.
Exactly.
Right.
Drive that bus for me.
Yeah, no pressure. Okay. Well, as you said, I'm not long a coach. I qualified in 2020, just as we were going into the pandemic. Yay, great time to branch out into a new business area. But I have been in the business of happiness and transformation for my whole career. I did a degree in languages way back in my teens, did a degree in Italian and French, and was lucky enough to be offered the opportunity to start teaching Italian just as I finished. So literally I graduated on the Friday and started teaching on the Monday in Waterford Institute of Technology. So I think I was 24. I hopped from one side of the desk to the other. Now I had taught already, I had done grinds. Funny enough, the year after my Leaving Cert, I started doing grinds for friends for their Leaving Cert, because I was good at languages and it was something people struggled with. So I was doing French grinds from the get-go. And I had taught English. I'd lived in Italy while I was studying because I did French and Italian in college. So I had taught English just off the cuff in Italy to make some extra money. So I kind of knew what I was doing and I got a textbook and sort of made it up as I went along, really. But teaching is so powerful. In that context, I was working with teenagers from 17 upwards, their first time away from home, with all the drama that brings. And they saw in me a much younger person than most of the other staff. And a lot of them connected with me and so would come to me with their dramas, so I'd be a listening ear and an open door in the office, girls having panic attacks over their exams and guys getting thrown out of their apartments for partying and things. I heard all the stories and it was an honor for me to be the one they chose to talk to. I took that role quite seriously.
And a responsibility.
It was. And you'd be sort of cautious giving advice because, you don't know the whole story. You're only hearing one bit of it. So I didn't know it at the time, but I took a more coaching approach than a counseling approach or an advice giver approach. Because in coaching, it's very much about just listening and facilitating and letting the person solve their own problem, helping them, encouraging them, asking the right questions so that a person draws out what they already know deep down already. So that was a little indicator of what lay ahead. I was in WIT for about 5 or 6 years and I loved it. I lived in Tramore, which is doggy beach heaven, by the way. You were saying earlier you have a dog. And if you don't have a dog in Tramore, what are you doing? It has a gorgeous big beach. And I had a rescued German Shepherd and I had a very happy life in Tramore. But twists and turns, and I moved home to Kerry in about the year 2000. They were opening an adult education centre in Kenmare. And the same day I was offered a job teaching English in Spain or teaching in the adult ed centre in Kenmare. And I was like, and I had to decide which I was going to do. But I decided that I'd move home and reconnect, having not lived here really for about 7 or 8 years. So I decided I'd move home, and I did. And I'm very glad that I did. I did move away again in between. It's been, I'm a person who likes to travel and I like new opportunities. So I'd never call myself locked into one place, shall we say.
I have to ask you, where did you live in Italy?
A few different places, actually. I was in Milan for some time early on. Before college, I took a year off and I lived in Milan for a few months. And then Bologna. I was in Bologna for the guts of a year, which was just amazing. It's the most beautiful place. And it's not very touristy. It's a university town. So it's very real. There's not too many people selling tea towels and tat for the tourists. I love Italy. Love it, love it, love it.
Yeah, me too. I think it was definitely one of the big negatives about COVID, not being able to go to Italy.
I feel the same. Yeah, my husband and I only had that conversation recently. It's like, it's been too long. I'm getting withdrawal because, I met him in my 30s and he hadn't traveled much. So he traveled with me, and having the languages, you get into places and are treated differently than if you're just English with a phrase book. So it's a fantastic advantage. In Italy, even having a few words of Italian, they love it because no one else in the world speaks Italian. It's not like Spanish that's spoken everywhere or French that has that global reach. So if you learn Italian, it's just for them and they love it.
Yeah. I'm stuck in the middle of Duolingo.
Good man. Keep it up.
Yeah. I think it's like my 248 consecutive days or whatever.
Wow, that's really impressive.
Yeah. But it's a drug as well. You get the reminders you're going to lose your
dopamine hit.
Oh, of course it is. And sometimes you're tired and go, oh, I have to do this now or I'm going to lose my streak. And but I love the place.
Where do you like to go?
Siena.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, that city for me is just incredible. It's a beautiful UNESCO preserved city.
Mm.
I think when I go there, this sounds like the most unusual thing. Now, we happened to go there many, many moons ago, not with any great plan or anything. And we happened to be there for the Palio.
Oh.
Yeah, and I've been back, I don't know, I think half a dozen times for the Palio. But when I go there, I have to put my hand on the walls as we go in. I just feel that place. I know that all sounds a bit cuckoo and bizarre and everything, but for some reason, it feels like a place, I don't know, that I have a connection with. So, Italy, absolutely.
It doesn't sound too cuckoo to me because I think we often discount the value of physical stuff.
Yeah.
We live in our heads a lot of the time and we forget that we have bodies and that our bodily needs and sensations and so on have great power. And that's a bodily need to connect with that physical 3D reality of that place.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place.
It is.
It has something very special. Now, the other thing you mentioned as well was your rescue dog.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wonder, Maggie, who is rescuing who?
100%. We rescued each other, she and I. Yeah. 100%. She was abandoned and she was extremely anxious. Like she'd wet the floor if a person came into the room unexpectedly, And German Shepherds have this reputation and it's so undeserved. Most of them are very intelligent, gentle dogs that I've met. Anyway, you can train it. Dogs respond to training. So if you train a dog to be aggressive, they're so big and strong, German Shepherds, they certainly have that potential, but they're not that way by nature in the most part. And she and I connected And like that, like you say, we rescued each other. We lived alone, she and I. I never felt unsafe having her with me. As a woman living alone, you have to be careful, but I never felt unsafe, especially because she was a German Shepherd. So, if unsavory looking people came to the door, I would hold her collar and I'd say, sorry, I can't open the door. My dog is cross. And they'd go, oh, okay.
No messing with you.
yeah, exactly. And you'd be out walking her and people would go, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Their reputation can be handy.
Yeah. I had another rescue German Shepherd a few years ago who was half Great Dane. So he was what they call a Great Shepherd. So take a normal German Shepherd and enlarge it in every direction.
Oh,
like I agreed to foster this dog online through Claws. We have an excellent animal rescue organization around here. This dog needed a foster home. And because when I've experienced with German Shepherds, I said, right, we have a space. I'll take him in for a few weeks. And I turned up to pick him up. And I came around the corner of the house and I was like, Jesus Christ, is he even going to fit in my car? Like, I thought he was a normal German Shepherd. And I came around the corner and here's this donkey coloured like a German Shepherd. And I was like, he barely fit in my boot. He had to have his head over the back seat like a horse in a horse box.
Oh my God.
He was enormous. Dog people loved him. Non-dog people were terrified.
Yeah, because he would eat you with one bite.
Yeah. Oh, he could have had your hand like in one bite, but like that, the most gentle, big baby.
I never got dogs because we didn't have them growing up, and you hear people obsessing about them, and I never quite got it until we had a dog, and eventually, I was worn down. And
worn down.
Yeah, exactly. But we're talking about happiness, and I think those little creatures, like little Bert sleeping alongside me here, it gives me so much happiness just to have him there.
So much, yeah.
And before we started recording, Maggie, he was a little bit peckish and he was looking for treats and one wasn't enough and he was barking. I think, I'm going to be talking to Maggie in a few minutes and you better shut up.
Yeah.
And we are talking about happiness. They contribute to your happiness, don't they?
Oh, they totally do. Absolutely. I mean, there's the fact that when you have a dog, you usually end up walking more.
Yeah.
And that's a great supporter of mental health, both the physical activity and the getting outside. But they are a constant source of company. You feel that you're not alone in the world. There's someone to talk to. There's someone to be happy when you come into the room or when you come back from work. It's the constant reassurance. They talk about when you're training in coaching, and I've heard it mentioned in terms of counseling as well, that unconditional positive regard. You heard that phrase? You're recommended to hold your clients in unconditional positive regard. I'm in your corner. I'm on your team. No matter what. I'm here to support you through the tough times, through the easy bits, around all the bends. That's what a coach does for you. And that's what your dog does for you. They don't care what kind of day you had at work. It's like, it's unconditional positive regard. And it's so reassuring. It's so warming.
We're going through a lot here. And of course, I derailed you from your conversation, your career journey.
Oh, right, because Italian and dogs, you've really hit on two of my great loves anyway, Italy and dogs. Yeah. So you're getting to the heart of the matter.
So adult education.
Yeah, adult education, particularly adult literacy. I trained while I was in Waterford. I trained as a volunteer adult literacy tutor because I had some spare time and it's an area I'm really interested in. I thought, at that time, the literacy situation in Ireland was particularly hard. There was 1 in 4 Irish adults ranking at the lowest level of literacy in the 90s. So 1 in 4 Irish people had a level of literacy where they couldn't read the back of a medicine bottle reliably. They might get it right, they might not. They might have to ask for help to read a bottle of Calpol or whatever, paracetamol, things like that. So they were looking for volunteers to help with this problem. And as I had a teaching background, by that time I had a qualification as well. I volunteered in Waterford City. So when I started working down here in Kenmare, I started working with the literacy service as well, as a tutor, as a volunteer, and then as a group tutor as well. And wow, the most rewarding work you could ever do, helping an adult to learn to read and to learn to write. It's so, again, it's transformational. It's so all-encompassing, and it radiates out from them. By helping one person, you help their whole family. It's amazing.
again, that's a big contributor to your well-being and your own happiness, what you get from that thing that you do. And why is it, Maggie? My daughter, Ellen, she's a special needs assistant,
Mm-hmm.
and she's working in St. Paul's in Cork. And I hear the stories, and even during COVID with the masks and everything, like these kids with the runny noses, and they just come up and they give you a hug. And Ellen has a little bit of a medical thing, so she would have been in a risk category, I would say, when it came to COVID in particular. But she just says you have to hug them and love them and blow their nose for them and all that kind of thing. And I see the work that she's doing and how much she gets from it. And I listen to you saying exactly the same thing. Why is it that these roles that are so critical, we look at them in a particular way, and the people who execute those roles probably get paid to a very average to maybe lower level? And yet then the soulless work, the high level rock and rolling work, big finance, all that kind of thing, where people get super duper rewards, probably can be as empty as anything. Do we need the big financial rewards and maybe all the trappings that go with that to compensate you for doing stuff that's soulless? I wonder.
And I think that gender has a card to play in that question, because those roles that you mentioned, like special needs assisting, teaching, nursing, which definitely is one of the toughest jobs in the country, they were traditionally women's jobs. As such, then, they were never driven up the money ladder the way other professions were. The gender pay gap is real, and it isn't just within sectors, it's across sectors. I mean, who works harder, a nurse or an account manager?
Yeah. Now, I presume when you're talking gender gap, that's kind of circumstantial in some respects, in that if it's the male special needs assistant or the female financial high roller, I assume 100% they should be on exactly the same money for that role. The reward should be exactly the same. Is that caring dimension that comes into it, that these roles, and I guess in a way when I say that, I didn't think we get hoovered into a gender conversation.
Yeah, I know. And I'm not an expert in that area, so I don't have like a handful of statistics or anything to quote back to you, I'm afraid.
Yeah. No, but part of it is that we're not rewarding those types of roles. And as you were saying, a lot of the time it ends up being the female with that big caring gene, maybe, that nurturing, part of their makeup that's perfect for those jobs. And maybe you get sufficient reward from that. You don't need that financial stuff. But in a funny way as well, a lot of the time when it comes to gender equality, one of the conversations that I have when it comes to equality is the man's ability to be a parent and to get that, because a lot of the time I don't think that's equal. That I don't have an equal opportunity to be that nurturer of that child, because in my case, there wasn't even a week off when a child was born. You were back to work. I actually got scolded in a particular job at one time because I missed a meeting the day after my child was born, because I was literally required to mind the other child.
Yeah.
And you were scolded, and it was a case of what the hell. It wasn't congratulations on having the child. It was, you're in big trouble now because you missed that meeting. And you're like, yeah. Actually, I didn't come to blows, but that was one time when I said to the boss who I had big issues with, I said, this is one time where I am not putting work first. You can go and get effed. Yeah, not going to happen. You can think whatever you want about it. I'm out of here. So I wonder, does that opportunity for that nurturing side, does that become the exclusive domain of the female? Because maybe the males didn't have enough opportunity to discover that in themselves. And as time is going on now, maybe that's being addressed more. And
I think it is.
Is it 2 weeks now?
The conversation is changing.
Yeah. And it should be.
But this is all a cycle, you see, and it's all a legacy situation that we've inherited. Like you said, it often ends up being the women in these roles, like SNAs and nurses and so on. But the problem is that it started out being women in those roles. These have always been roles dominated by women, like primary teaching, always dominated by women, SNAs dominated by women. And that's, I think, why they don't earn big bucks. The principals also don't earn big bucks, in fairness, but they're predominantly men. And you can look at why that is. And I think part of it is because principals have to work a lot of outside school hours. And a lot of the women by that time in their careers have a young family and don't want to be going to meetings at 7 o'clock in the evening and so on. You could parallel that to politics. The hours that our politicians are expected to work are not family friendly.
Oh, of course they're not.
And you're on the road and you're out at meetings and so on. And looking at gender representation in our political system, you have to question how either parent is meant to do that and be a parent. And if we have a system that doesn't support parents to work in it, like how are we going to have a system that represents everyone?
Yeah, and we had a funny scenario where we were making a senior appointment in Fusion, and we had the role offered to a woman who was coming back from that kind of home situation. The kids were a little bit older now. I think the agency she was with weren't going to entertain a 4-day week. They weren't going to give her any flexibility. It was kind of all or nothing. So she loved what we had to offer. And it was all done and dusted, agreed, contract signed. She was about to start. And she came back then literally a fortnight later, before she was due to start, to say husband was after getting a big promotion. He was going to be doing a lot of international travel. So she's decided she's just going to not go back into the workplace. And I kind of got really angry, not with her. I was disappointed because I thought she was a fabulous woman and everything. But I thought, what are you doing? What are you doing here? You are making a choice. You are sacrificing your path for his. Was that a big expectation from him if he was going to take this high roller job that she would, take a step back? I'm not sure. But one way or the other, I'm thinking, you made a decision to get back into this. You actually, you signed up. You got a contractual side. So when we talk about some equality and representation with percentage-wise, and I see things like that happening, I said, of course, those numbers are going to fall apart if you're going to make decisions like that. Now, that was an example of one. But I'm seeing that and you're thinking, come on.
It does seem a bit of a throwback, doesn't it?
Yeah.
He gets the big job and she steps down. But we don't know what was going on behind the scenes. Maybe she didn't need the money anymore and thought, woohoo, now I can just be off.
And that can be a happiness choice as well. And
it could be.
If he's the high roller doing the international travel, and God, look, my worst nightmare now would be a life spent in airports and traveling and all of that stuff. What a nightmare. And if you're going to do that, you should be rewarded for it because,
correct.
That's a shit life. And you better be well compensated. So then you've got that gender pay scenario where she's quite dependent then. And I would say vulnerable and maybe losing herself as a part of herself in the process. I would think the same. Yeah. Or maybe then she's high-fiving. Excellent. I can walk the talk a bit more. I don't know.
Yeah.
We're deviating a lot in this conversation, but it's good.
That's okay. It's Friday.
Yeah. It's good.
We don't have an agenda.
Yeah, exactly. So the idea that you might start life coaching, when did that come into your head? Because I know you're qualified now 2.5 years.
Yeah.
When did that niggle at you? When did that itch begin?
Probably 5 or 6 years ago. So I have 2 children who are now sort of tweens. They're 13 and 10. And when they were younger and we were sort of in the trenches of small kids, 2 working parents, hurling training, football training, drama, you're constantly on the go and juggling and trying to be everything to everyone and trying to do your best because parenting is such an important job.
Huge.
You try and do your best. You don't want to just leave it at the bottom of your priority list. And nor do you want to leave your employer at the bottom of your priority list. So who ends up at the bottom of your priority list? Yourself.
Yeah.
Kids are up there. Husband is up there. Job is up there. Community, all these commitments. And you just slip down the list. And so I was that soldier 5 or 6 years ago, just pushing the boulder up the hill all the time. Nothing felt fun anymore. And yet I had this lovely life. If you looked at it from the outside, I live in a beautiful place, as we've discussed. I have a great husband, great marriage, great kids. They're crack, lovely garden. I have a good job that I enjoy. And I had all this. And yet here I was just falling into bed and feeling empty, feeling joyless. And I knew One of my personal commandments is that you can't complain about something until you've done everything you can to try and fix it. So complain away to me as long as you've tried a few things at least to fix it. But if you come complaining to me, I'm going to ask you, so what have you tried? It's one of my personal things. I won't just give up. I'll try and I'll keep trying to fix a thing. I'm persistent. So I was like, right, what am I going to do? So I started reading. I've always had an interest in psychology and self-help. So I started reading and reading and reading. And I learned that there was a lot I could do to make things better for myself. So I started noticing who I was. I started trying to reconnect with who I was, journaling, asking questions of myself, noticing when sparks of joy happened and going, this is really fun. I like this. Like I discovered that I liked kayaking. I had never kayaked before. My husband does water sports. We had sailed. I loved being on the sea, I noticed. So I tried kayaking. I sort of tried when you notice something that really works for you to go, okay, what else could I do? Because you can't go sailing all the time. The weather window for sailing is really small. Is it windy? No, it's too windy. Is it sunny? No, it's too sunny, or it's not sunny enough, So we had a kayak, we took it out, and it was brilliant. So noticing things like that bring joy in your life and going, well, I can't go kayaking every day either. What else can I do? How can I adjust things to bring more joy into my life? More, and not just joy. Joy is the creme de la creme. Like if you had a sort of a range of happiness words, I think joy would be right at the top. Happiness might be in the middle. Contentment might be towards the bottom. It's the gentler end of happiness, isn't it? It's the sort of background, everything's okay kind of happiness. And really, I would have settled for that because I wasn't content. And, gratitude comes into contentment as well. Are you happy with what you have? And so I started practicing gratitude. I know it sounds very hipster, practicing gratitude, but it really does work. It changes your brain chemistry. When you focus on what you have, as opposed to what you're lacking, it changes your brain chemistry. And the more times you do it, the more that neural pathway is laid down. So the easier it becomes.
So does that just mean you do that to get yourself in the right frame of mind to make some of those changes and those better choices?
It changes your frame of mind about the choice. It changes the background.
That's a foundation stone, really, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a good word for it because it changes the whole context. If you go into your day with a positive frame of mind, and if you end your day with a positive frame of mind, literally it changes your brain. Like we're learning, I read a lot about neurology, neuroscience. My coaching qualification is coaching with neuroscience. So there was a good bit in it about the physical brain aspects of our life experience, especially our connection with another person and how our bodies react to that other person. Because your brain isn't your mind. It's a physical thing sitting up there in your skull. And it's part of this amazing electrical system that is your body. And it responds to other people and to your environment and to your mind as well. It's uber connected. So we can control our brain development to a certain degree. Like by the end of this conversation, your brain and my brain will have grown a little bit from what we've learned from each other and from the connection we've had with each other. Isn't that mad? That if you had a brain scan yesterday and a brain scan at lunchtime today when we're finished talking, they'd show new growth from connecting with each other. I think that's amazing.
It is amazing. And when you put that in the COVID context and the working from home context and life suddenly conducting a lot of your 9 to 5 stuff from a room in your house.
Yes,
and
that lack of
from
connection.
Zoom call to Zoom call without meeting people. And I think this is the part we're still learning and that we're struggling with, is having the mind and the wherewithal to make good decisions about when it should be a face-to-face and when it's more than perfect to have a more convenient life and conduct some of those meetings on Zoom or whatever. People are having huge issues, I believe, with that transition between the two. It's funny, I got my hair cut yesterday and
it's looking good.
Yeah, thank you. You should have seen it beforehand. The bullshit conversations that go on in the hair salon. Well, the conversation right next to me was all about, I'm still working from home, blah, 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 and all that kind of thing. So I was, my poor lady was chatting away to me about something. And I don't know what she was saying because I was totally soaking up the conversation. I was like, yeah, could you hold on there now a second? I'm not good at multitasking from an attention point of view. I talk about winning happy, and what I kind of say to people, I use this analogy of that we're all chiseling, and we're chiseling a life for ourselves
Yeah.
to hopefully make us happy. And I think I love the language you're using about getting in the right frame of mind to be able to do that in the first place. And some of those changes are small little tweaks. And of course, some of them are big changes, like I'm going to become certified at being a coach and, using neuroscience as a base for that and going all in. Was that going to be a hobby? I'm interested in this area. Was it, okay, I'm going to be a practitioner here? And when suddenly was it a profession for you?
Well, I got into it really for the self-discovery part and to try and put a shape on the skills that I knew I'd been developing through my whole career. I said to you already that I was the listening ear in WIT for the students in trouble. And then I started working in adult literacy, and a lot of the people I was working with had been given the sticky end of the stick. They'd maybe left school young. There were people on the margins a lot of times, people who'd had a tough life. It's not easy to grow up in a literate world with reading difficulties and writing difficulties. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of taboo, maybe lack of work progression, lack of opportunities, loneliness. The Venn diagram of people with literacy difficulties and people with mental health difficulties overlaps quite a bit because it's harder for you to access help. If you can't read articles about mental health tips and happiness tips like you and I do, then some of that knowledge is out of your reach. And now with this digital world, so much internet access depends on reading as well. So again, the knowledge is out of their reach for taking care of themselves, unless someone actually tells them about it and if they have the courage to ask for help. So I'd had that listening ear experience. And then in working in literacy, I'd seen the power of change, really, because when a person comes to the literacy service, they're ready to make a change and they're coming to you for the support and the mechanism to make that change happen. But you can't do it for them. You have to just help them along, help them identify where do they want to get to, help them build their motivation, because it's going to be a long road, depending where you're starting. I would occasionally deal with people who had no literacy at all. We'd start with the alphabet. But more often, people would be somewhere on the line and would lack the confidence to move forward. So they could fill in a form maybe, but they wouldn't do it with you looking. Or they could write their name and address, but they would never write a letter to the teacher at school, we'll say, because that's too public. And it's often confidence is really key here, being seen. Whereas like a doctor would write and no one would be able to read it and they wouldn't care because they're educated and they have that confidence. A person with a literacy difficulty, their writing could look exactly the same as that doctor and they would be mortified. They wouldn't let anyone see it. So you'd work with them around the skills, but also around the confidence and about becoming aware of the progress they'd made and celebrating the victories and the wins and the steps and building resilience to deal with the tough parts. Building resilience to deal with the times when something took longer than planned or they weren't able to progress through something because, learning is a bumpy road. Some of it is easier than others. So getting past their negative self-talk was also a huge part. If you've been told by your teachers that you're stupid, you're going to believe it because a lot of them grew up in an era when the teacher was God and that teacher telling you were stupid, sit at the back of the class, I'm not wasting my time with you. Yeah. That is the voice in their head 40 years later.
Or hitting you in the back of your hand.
The blackboard duster being thrown down the room. I've heard them all.
Yeah.
I had a man in his 70s crying in my office one day, telling me the story of the woman behind the counter in the post office. He was in England, of Irish family and in England. And he had to fill out a little slip to get his money out of his post office account. And he misspelt the word 3 as tree. And he put in his slip and she mocked him in front of everyone for his spelling mistake and that it came from his Irish accent. You thick paddies, you know nothing. He was in his 70s. We were talking 65 years later and this man was burning with the shame of that
Yeah,
moment. Telling me
humiliation
about
and
it.
then
Yeah.
you self-esteem and anger and everything that goes with that.
He had internalized that. He said school changed for him after that. He was ashamed of his lack of skills and he felt that he was stupid. And so that blocked him from engaging with school. So that blocked him progressing further. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. He was fantastic. He worked on his literacy with me. And oh my God, he would text me sometimes on the weekend going, wait till I show you what I've read today. And he texted me like he couldn't wait to come in next week and show me what he read. And as computers became more widespread and he got a smartphone, he started doing online games. I wonder if he's doing Wordle nowadays, actually. I'm not in contact with him at the minute, but he started doing online word searches and stuff. And he was just so excited with this new world that literacy opened up for him. So in that world, then I started to see the power of change and the power of persistence, having a goal, identifying your blockages, coaching yourself around them, because, I'm not going to be sitting there holding your hand while you do your work. I have to help you to build the skills to support yourself. And that's coaching all over. So I decided to qualify to professionalize what I knew I had been doing all along and put a new shape to it. Plus, I love working with people, and I work in adult education for Kerry ETB, and there's a lot of paperwork in my job now. Our job has changed a lot over the last 10 years, we'll say, particularly since it's public money. It has to all be very carefully accounted
Of course,
for.
yeah.
It has to be very transparent. So there's a lot of request forms and report forms and stuff. So I wanted to, in my spare time, because I don't work full time. So in my spare time, I wanted a side hustle that touched me back in with working with people. Because in that time that I described to you, when I was trying to rediscover who I was and what brought me happiness, I realized that connection is what brings me happiness. Looking back over my career, that was the common denominator of the happy times in my work life, was when I was involved in facilitating change for people, facilitating transformation, helping them to make things better for themselves.
So who knocks on your door?
It really varies. I get some people coming to me for help changing careers or changing jobs within their career, or just for the thinking and planning bit. I'm not happy in my job because, going back to that question, what does happiness mean to you? We can all at different times have a happiness drain in a different part of your life. So your family life might be going fine, but your work life is really dragging you down, or your fitness, your health is dragging you down, or it's your friendships, you're lonely, you've disconnected from the people that matter to you. A lot of us during COVID, that was a problem. So like if you picture a wheel of all the different areas of your life, you might have one or two segments that aren't as shiny as they could be, So for different people, it's different segments. So like I say, I get people coming for help with their jobs, but for other people, it's their health and their well-being. I mean, your habits really contribute in that area. Every day is how we spend our lives, they say. And so much of our actions are repeated. They can really have an impact on your health, physical and mental health.
So do you have a particular process with people that you deal with?
Yes. I mean, it varies a little bit from person to person, but it always starts with that process I described that I went through myself, which was reconnecting with who you are, having a look at who are you now. If I met you today afresh, if you met yourself today, who are you? What brings you happiness? What drags you down? What do you enjoy doing? Who do you enjoy being around? Like, for example, in relation to your health, we often talk about diet and the importance of it. But in terms of your mental health, the diet of input coming into your head every day, a lot of it is habitual. A lot of it you won't even notice that you might have a habit of listening to a certain radio program driving home from work. Then you get home and you scan the headlines on your phone. And then maybe you watch this program and that program. And then maybe in the evening you talk to your partner and it might center around this topic or not, say housey stuff, for example. And then at the weekends you do sport. And at the weekends, maybe you bring kids to different places. So all of that information is coming into your headspace. How much of it is bringing you joy? How much of it is lifting you up and how much of it is dragging you down? You spend time with a friend. Is that friend sucking your energy or giving you energy, or is it just neutral?
So in a way,
Taking
yeah.
time to notice those things, to actually analyze and go, do I really need that much current affairs in my life? Do I really need that much time with that person who's always moaning? Or could I switch it out for that person who I haven't seen for ages, who's really fun?
Getting
Like that moment of choice.
getting hoovered into a bullshit Twitter conversation.
Mm-hmm. Is this how I want to spend my life? Yeah. Because how you spend every day is how you spend your life. And like how much of your time, the odd bullshit Twitter conversation is fine. But if it's 3 hours in the evening, like if you're sitting on the couch while there's a film on and you're not engaging with the film because you're flicking on the phone, who are you helping there? Like, so noticing the drains and the feeders, for want of a better word, that's always step one. So once you know, like you can't change something till you know that it's there. And sometimes we don't even know where the problem is. We just know we're not happy. Like it's really hard to define happiness, but it's like that thing. I'll know it when I see it. And we know when we're missing it. You know, we can tune into that inner barometer. Like, yeah, this could be better, definitely. So identifying the source of the problem, drilling down, why is that a problem? And where did that come from? That's really important. So looking at the problems on one side, but also looking at what's working, what brings you joy, what brings you happiness, what relationships bring you happiness, what habits bring you happiness, choices. So go detective on it, you know? That's always the beginning.
Yeah, and obviously you're a good sounding board and you can probe people with the question. So it's nearly like doing a stock take on where you are.
That's a really good phrase for it, yeah. A stock take of where you are. Because then you can plan where you want to be and you plan then the steps that will take you from here to there. You know, and people are very tempted to go hammer and tongs and I'm going to do yoga 5 days a week and so on. And sometimes it's about building realistic steps. You know, what's meaningful for you and what's going to work, what's going to be doable when you're a person with other commitments. Because you don't want your road to happiness to make you unhappy.
Yeah, and at this time of the year, so maybe you can give the listener a few tips about doing some of that stock taking while they're on holidays. So can that summer break, that week that they get off, or that 2 weeks, or maybe if they're lucky they can get a little bit more than that, can that be an interesting time for someone to do a little bit of that self-diagnosis? Before we started recording, I was chatting to you about my little week off in Wexford, and I think I said to you that it was a good halfway through that break before I felt like I was on a break. And then before you know it, you're on that ugly path back to, all of those habits and rituals that you have. How can we use that time? Is there a bit of reading, or is it a case of doing nothing? What would you say to someone?
Well, we're all different, Greg. And really, you have to think about what has worked for me before. Past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior.
Yeah.
We often get caught in our fantasy self where we go, oh, I'll lie on the beach and I'll read novels. Is that what you've done on previous holidays? If it isn't, then it's unlikely you're going to do it this time around. You know? Look at what's worked for you in the past. What helped you to get headspace before, whether it was on holiday or at home? Are you a person who likes to have an agenda and have things planned out? Or are you a person who likes leaving things empty? Because really, there's two bands, isn't there, on holidays? And the trouble starts when they go on holidays together. When Mrs. Agenda goes on holiday with Mr. Nothing, or vice versa. You see those couples on holiday and it's not fun. Or in a group of friends, there can be two gangs, the ones who want to be up at 7 and heading to the castle and the ones who want to be waking up at 9:30 with a hangover. So knowing yourself is the first step. If you are feeling less than happy, shall we say, if you're feeling discontent, a bit fed up, and you've a holiday coming up, then I would suggest doing a little bit of pre-planning. I'm going to use this holiday as you say, a stock take, a self-check, a get to know myself adventure. So how could I set that up? Well, I could decide, do I work best with an agenda or with an empty diary? and discuss who you're going on holidays with, discuss this so that we're not setting yourself up for a fight, and make that decision. Okay, maybe you like a happy medium, a few things in the diary with room for spontaneity in between. And then just tune in to what choices you make and how they make you feel. Right down to, did I enjoy that meal and how did I feel after it? Did I enjoy that time on the beach and how did I feel after it? Sometimes we do things because we think we should. I'm on holiday, so I should be on the beach with a novel. And you do it. And like if I do that, it's all great for 5 minutes. And then I'm too hot and there's sand in my book and I don't have a drink. It's not my idea of fun at all, but it's a should in my mind. A mom on holiday should sit with a book and a sun lounger. Like it's such a cliche, but actually it's not fun for me. So it's a bit of a golden rule. It could be fun for other people, but it might not be fun for you. So take your holiday opportunity to tune in to what's really fun for you, because we often try things on holiday that aren't part of our weekly routine at home. And if you find something that's really fun for you, it's a big flashing light. I could do with more of this in my life at home. Is there a way I can make room for this? Now, if it's cocktails in a bar on the beach, that may not be directly applicable to your life in a housing estate in Clonakilty, we'll say. But what about it can I bring home? What aspects of that experience can I transplant into my weekly life that'll bring me a little bit of regular happiness? Maybe it's socializing more with my friends, or maybe it's going out and meeting new people. What aspect of it can I transplant? What's transferable to my daily life?
The fact that you're away, and whether it is lying on a beach doing very little or whether it is hectic, one way or the other, you have jumped from your normal treadmill.
Yeah.
So your mind is going to just wander in different places. So is there anything that we can do just to kind of pay attention to that just a little bit more? Because I find myself, when you do go away, thoughts come to you.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, one of my big signals is a few particular things that aren't always that nice. But I find when I give my mind enough space away from the kind of routine, weird things start popping into it. So you can just see there's just space for other thoughts, and hopefully they're positive ones, you know?
Well, it gives you perspective, doesn't it? When you step off that moving floor, you're looking at it from outside. So you're away from your normal life, and it gives you a chance to look at how are you spending your life. Particularly, I think the feelings you have when it's nearly time to come home, I think they're really informative.
Yeah.
Are you dying to get home, or are you dreading getting home? Are you dying to get home but dreading going to work? And if you're dreading going home, it's worth digging down and going, what is the problem here? What is the problem? Because getting words around that problem, is it the house? Is it your environment in the house? Is it the atmosphere in the house? Is it your relationships in the house? Is it, something physical outside the house, the neighborhood you live in, where you've your commute? What is it? And it can take time, because you might have a glib answer. Oh, I'm just miserable. I just want to stay in the sun. But that's not it, because plenty of people come home and are dying to get home. Your children, for example, will probably be dying to get home. Often when we're away, kids are going, oh, can't wait to get home and see my teddies, or they're dying to get back to the familiar. We have such a big link, obviously, to home and feeling safe and comfortable and so on. And that's really important when you're smaller. But so if you're dreading going home or going back to work, that's a goldmine for self-knowledge. Because once you get words around the source of that dread, then you get to choose whether or not you're able or willing to make changes to reduce it. Sometimes we're caught in a situation where, maybe somebody hates their job, but they're not able to change it right now because maybe they have something medical going on. Maybe they're the sole breadwinner and they're too busy to look for a job, or maybe they tell themselves they are. But that little conversation, why am I dreading going back to work? And if I'm dreading it, what can I do about it?
Yeah. So on that flight on the way home, or that car ride home, would it be the worst thing in the world just to take out your smartphone and just capture some of those feelings and some of those thoughts you have, so that you don't lose that moment of clarity in a way? And just
I absolutely agree.
Reflect on those. And in some respects then, Maggie, do we put too much responsibility on a holiday to sort out our lives and to bring us happiness? When you're bouncing from one holiday to the next and the in-between bits aren't really, really good. Because I know what you're saying about that awful going back to life or going back to work feeling. But sometimes we play that every Sunday evening, don't we?
Yeah. And if that is your reality, are you willing to accept that?
Yeah.
Are you willing to accept spending the only life you get feeling dread every Sunday night?
Yeah.
Do you deserve to have a job that doesn't fill you with dread? You know that analogy, you've probably come across it, where there's a river and there's people by the river and there's suddenly a child comes flowing down the river and they panic and they grab the child and pull it out at the river. Oh my God, you're saved. Thanks be to Jesus, And the next thing, there's another child coming down the river and they're like, oh my God. And they put out the pole and they rescue the child. And then more children start coming. And so people gather and there's teams and they start making relays so that the river is never left unattended and the children are saved. But then one person says, I'm going upstream to see what is happening. Why are these children falling in? So if you're the person whose holidays are the only respite from a crappy life, and if you're going another holiday to try and boost your mental health, to try and get back to feeling okay, maybe it's time to go upstream and look at the source of the problem and stop having to try and fix the problem.
So maybe
try and prevent it, disable it, dismantle it upstream where the source of your unhappiness is. Because oftentimes that's part of the power of coaching, actually, is that there's always something you can do. We can feel that there's nothing I can do here, but there's always more choices than you realize. And taking the time to bounce your situation around with a professional gives you a different perspective. It gives you a chance to see things from another person's point of view and to explore other options for changes that are definitely within your power. We all have more power to change than we realize, because sometimes even the smallest change can unlock a stuck situation.
How can people contact you, Maggie?
Well, my website is maggieosullivanlifecoach.com. I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. I like social media, so because it's a type of connection. A lot of people badmouth social media, but if you're careful about it and if you keep boundaries around your time, like I have an app setting on my phone that warns me if I've more than a certain amount of time on any app, and it's invaluable because it's such a time suck.
The thing I kind of say to people is that in a way it's like a radio, and you need to find the channel that you like. And in a way, you create that channel through who you follow.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So maybe take control of the channel and avoid those people who are dragging you down, or those conversations or those topics that hoover you up.
Yes, because you can unfollow people and pages without them ever knowing. So if you have a friend who constantly shares stuff that really isn't your thing, just unfollow them. You don't have to unfriend them. Unfollow them and watch your feed, curate your feed a bit. Go and follow things that are good news. There's loads of good news websites and Facebook pages out there, and that bring you little happy stories every day. They can be a real happiness booster. Looking at people's, there's so many happy rescue dog posts, Greg.
Well, as a dog-loving person, you have to follow Niall Harbison.
Niall Harbison?
Niall Harbison was a celebrity chef with Conrad Gallagher. He was out chefing.
Oh, he's the guy, the Thai dog guy. Yeah, amazing.
Every single morning, I look at his tweet, his post, and it puts me in a good frame of mind. There was another old soldier that he was helping today. Now, I know you're in Kenmare. Do you work with people over Zoom?
Yes, I do.
Okay, perfect.
I do. In Kerry and West Cork, I meet people face-to-face as well if they want.
Yeah.
Some people like working online purely or a mix. Yeah, I'm open to suggestion in both of those.
Perfect. Now, I need to ask you what's happiness to you. You've probably been telling me all along, but go on, give me your quick version of it.
Well, there isn't a quick version. Happiness for me is a Friday like this with time to chat and do my own stuff and not be driven by other people's agendas too much. It's a chance to choose. I think happiness is having the chance to choose how I
That's
spend my time, how I spend my energy, who I talk to.
and part that I tag onto that in winning happy. What does winning look like for Maggie, both now and
Taking
going
the
forward?
choices. I think for me, it's having that time to choose and then taking the steps, making the choices, and actually investing the energy in yourself because change happens whether we like it or not. So when we proactively change, like I said, reconnect with yourself, notice what works and what doesn't, what makes you happy. And then we take the steps to bring more happiness into our lives. That's winning. Take the steps to give yourself a gift. It's brilliant. It doesn't have to be big. Buy yourself a nice book. It doesn't have to be big. It can be small changes. They can be big wins, really, to use your language.
And so many of the things are out of our control. So it makes total
Mm-hmm.
sense to take some of those things back, as many as you can. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm reading a book. Kids, do what you want. I don't care.
Yeah. And you can feel smug in the knowledge that you're modeling literacy for them.
I'm not standing at the bottom of the river all day for you.
No, exactly.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. So
Yeah.
the big whopper of a question, what was your best day?
That is a big question, Greg. Wow, my best day. Oh, I've had some crackers. I mean, the big highlights pop to your mind, like my wedding day, surrounded by my friends and my family. I got married in Killarney. We had the reception in Dingle. It was brilliant. My dad drove a bus for the guests. He was a bus driver. He drove a bus for the guests. He got lost. It was great.
What a great day.
Yeah, it was the 1st of November, and yet it was bright sunshine. We did the photos on Inch Beach. That was brilliant. So they're the big headlines. But then there's been some brilliant days on holidays. You mentioned holidays earlier. Sardinia, drinking wine in a little square with music playing, Rome, walking along the Tiber and chatting with artists selling their paintings. Jesus, like when you're lucky enough to travel, there's so many good days out there waiting for you. And I can't wait to travel again after COVID. It's been like losing a limb. I mean, traveling, we tend to think of that word as like going backpacking in Asia. But, when you live in South Kerry, Dublin, it's traveling. To get out of the Beara Peninsula and get out and see the big wide world is just brilliant. So some of my best days have been on the move, like yourself, I'm sure.
Yeah, what you said there, I remember sitting in St. Mark's Square in Venice and we just bought a few glasses of champagne that were ridiculously expensive.
And it's worth it, isn't it?
Of course it is. Yeah, beautiful music playing in the background. And I called my dad to say thank you.
Did you?
Yeah, just kind of like, thank you.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What the hell is wrong with him?
Yeah, of course. But, I bet afterwards he thought about it. But the emotion of something like that, of the perfection of that moment caught up with you. That's
totally
lovely. Nice. And, it's worth investing in memories, isn't it, though? Like, are you going to spend the money on a new lawnmower or a weekend away? Give me the weekend away anytime.
Well, I've got the most amazing neighbour called Brian. This is a great tip. Seeing as we're talking about the summer and grass that needs cutting on a regular basis.
Yeah, I'm looking out here at it now. Yeah, go on.
So I've got a little Flymo electrical thing that you just plug in. Yeah, it's really awkward, but there you go. The reason I have it is I couldn't be bothered with petrol and getting it serviced and going to the garage and footing. It was really an easy, lazy option. So Brian and Cleena were away one particular weekend and I was cutting my grass, so I cut his. He's got one of these super duper petrol mowers. Since that day, he's been pretty much cutting my grass all of the time.
Oh, isn't that lovely?
Yeah, he's the most fantastic neighbour, and I can absolutely say I love them. And that's a weird thing to say about your neighbour, but I love him.
Not at all.
I love him, and I love Cleena, and I love the two boys, Thomas and Olin. So
what a source of happiness, right?
Isn't that good?
And you drew that into your life by doing something nice.
Oh, totally. On my birthday, a few months back, I wanted to see my family, my friends, and I wanted to go into them to have just a little drink, to say hello. And it was perfect. So Maggie, thank you so much for coming on the Win Happy podcast. It was such a great conversation. Thank you.
I really enjoyed it as well. We went round the
you.
houses, but it was all kind of connected in the middle somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. I think I had a rough idea as to the route that we were going to take. There were a few diversions, as you said, but it was brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, Greg.
Yeah, fantastic.
I love your work. I love listening to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much.
And I follow you on LinkedIn. I read your blog. I'm a bit of a stalker, actually.
Yeah, well, I was going to share a story about some friends that we have that we met for dinner one night, and you mentioned stalking, and that's cool. You notice the odd thing about someone. My God, they had every detail.
Oh,
I was like, oh my God, on Christmas morning, and the dog did this, and didn't Ellen and Brendan call in then, and your mother was over, like,
no,
that this wasn't casual observation. It was, I don't know, it took it to another level, but they're lovely people. So
that'd be really unsettling.
Yeah, I hope they don't listen to the podcast, because they'll think, oh shit, are we really like that?
They probably do, if they're your stalkers.
Well, this is true. I love you. Thank you for listening. Take it easy, Maggie. Thank you.
Goodbye, Greg.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for listening to the Win Happy podcast, which has been brought to you by Fusion Communications. If you'd like to get in touch, feel free to send me an email at greg@fusion.ie. So until next time, take it easy.